I had failed, but was still in a strong position behind my barricade. With the power and water cut off, I needed to make renewable sources of food and water to survive into the future. I'd been looking outwards for my salvation, but overlooked what lay at my doorstep, or more accurately, the 23 other doorsteps within the compound. Each house was brimming with food, water, and supplies, all ripe for the picking. This time would be different. This time, I would conquer the insanely infested streets of Louisville. So I set off. Breaking the compound into quadrants, I tackled the eastern face and took anything of remote value. By grabbing everything and visiting every home, I aim to confidently say there were no zombies or unaccounted loot left in the houses. Despite the indiscriminate ransacking, I had my eye out for a couple of items. I was still short on the next carpentry volume and hoped to find more weapons. After clearing 4 homes, I marked off the burnt down buildings from earlier, finished reading the farming skill book, and welcomed the next day. Under the dark of night, I quickly wrapped up the remainder of the eastern homes. I was confident they were clear, but I snuck around just in case. With my first quadrant done, I sat and listened for any incoming helicopters. But nothing. It was time to move on to the northern homes. At this point, all perishable food had rotted, and the food left on the countertops of the first home was no exception, but the containers remained useful as they could store water. The house continued to set a strong precedent as I found a hand torch, a magazine to operate generators, and some weapons. Continued working away on the houses and found valuable but ordinary items. It was a monotonous task with some highlights.
What the fuck?
But well worth it. Having hauled large amounts of weight all day, I started to run out of energy, but I kept pushing into the last 2 homes. I returned from almost finishing the northern face to a problem. All my containers were full. As a temporary solution, I dumped my empty water vessels into a corner and called it a day. Rather than cautiously moving in the dark, my hand torch let me power through the last northern home and start on the western buildings. Having run out of storage, I began dumping items in large piles on the floor for me to sort later. Taking a break, I tried to forage for items on my way back, but found little. In the last home, I came away with an invaluable score. If I read the magazines, I could work on the various cars around the compound and grind my mechanic skill on them. At level 2 mechanics and electrical 1, you can hotwire cars, letting you drive them without keys. For now, it was useless, but not in the future. Under torchlight, I wrapped up the western face and cracked on with the southern homes. In the 4th, I found the carpentry book I was looking for and another baseball bat. After stripping the last 2, I could confidently say the compound was free of the undead. I was safe, but I would need to sort all of this. For reading material storage, I'd steal my neighbor's bookshelves and expand my kitchen cabinetry for the rest. Almost on cue, a zombie bashing on my wall interrupted me before I could start. I was unstoppable. Regardless, it was only a matter of time until my home would be clean and chic. Taking advantage of another early start, I stole a white bookshelf and placed it in my living room. I could finally dent the pile. With the shelves quickly filled, I began searching for a matching set to finish the job. After a quick rest, I added some books to the shelf and remembered the water vessels I had placed in the corner. Rather than doing nothing inside, they could sit on the grass at the back and capture rainwater. I need to boil it to drink it, but I could still wash clothes or water plants with the tainted water. Not knowing what qualified, I placed just about anything onto the lawn and hoped it would work. Once back inside, I loaded the shelves and set up even more storage solutions. I filled the cardboard boxes with an assortment of books, magazines, discs, and VHS tapes. Began expanding the kitchen cabinetry to accommodate the mountain of items still left on my floor. I hit level 2 carpentry, meaning I'd no longer have a multiplier on experience gained, but but as I had found the second volume on my looting spree, I read into the night, the morning, and through the emergency broadcast frequency to get it for the next two. Checking my progress on my negative traits, my lean eating strategy was paying off. I had reached 87 kilos. The same could not be said for my fitness or strength, as I was still far from the next level, let alone removing my negative modifiers. I continued removing the cabinetry from my neighbours and moved it into my kitchen, letting me store food from the floor and consolidating it from my other containers. Before heading to bed, I designated the bathroom cabinet for medical and cosmetic supplies and turned in. I continued the following day, expanding my kitchen, trying to move my couch, adding more shelving, and filling each container with one item group. These included literature, water, electronics, and weapons. My kitchen was finally clean, and I could afford to add more homey touches. Needing a break, I began foraging. Failing to find anything inside the courtyard, I searched along the road. I'd forgotten about the two locked cars in the northwest corner. The Cerise was in good condition, so I broke into it and looked for keys. I was also unlucky when checking the Valulin, but I didn't need keys. With those magazines I found and a little experience grinding, I could hotwire them. Having a car would significantly increase my range for loot runs, and after a mysterious fire wiped out the nearest hardware store, I needed it. I was looking outwards again, but from a stronger position. With a shot at redemption, I was going for it. All it would take is a grind. Using a wrench and a screwdriver, I uninstalled and reinstalled the parts on the two crashed cars at the back of the compound. Each attempt could damage the car part and eventually break them, but as they were already damaged, I didn't care. Over time, the cars became unrecognizable, so I broke each piece and left them strewn about. The repetitive but tiresome work wore away, and I found myself overheating. I usually avoid removing armor, but I was safe behind my walls. Needing a place to rest, I replaced my couch with a single seater and returned to my skill grind. I was almost there. Running out of parts to work on, I sacrificed another car, forgetting that I could only work on standard and performance cars, not commercial ones. Eager to hotwire, I skipped exercising and scrounged the remaining experience on the few parts still left on the two cars. When hotwiring cars, every failure can set off an alarm. If the radius was large enough, it could pull the undead inside, but the reward was too great not to try. The cautious approach would be to hotwire one car, but it was free real estate. With a small amount of gas in the tank, I floated down the side street to the entrance. Like every inch of progress in Louisville, a group of zombies came to celebrate. I broke into the last usable car in the compound and picked up a high-quality walkie-talkie from inside. Without gas, the step van wasn't worth hotwiring, so I left it in favour of bringing the gassed-up Cerise to the entranceway. I was once again ready for another run for the items necessary to secure my future. But with limited hardware stores, I couldn't afford to fail again. Heading deeper into the city meant more zombies, so I chose to look further away for my salvation. Closest nearby was on the outskirts, a distance greater than I had ever travelled across Louisville. But if I could surmount it, I could secure my future. I spent the remainder of the day locking down my base. The walkie-talkie I'd picked up had the emergency broadcast frequency, so I tuned in and went to work. No furniture was safe as I dismantled them for planks and nails, or used them in another barricade. Waking in the early hours, I gathered supplies, stocked my cerise with food and water, and opened my barricade. Today would be a long day. I found myself retracing the steps I had made to get here. Passing all the landmarks reminded me of the early struggles I'd overcome. Despite the nostalgia, it was a slow process traversing the crowded streets with the Sunday driver trek. Eventually, I was in uncharted territory. It felt more feral out here. Along one of the stretches of road, I found myself beset by walls on one side and trees on the other, forcing me to weave between the groups occupying the road. It was close. But I prevailed. Arriving at the store, I gathered what I could, clustered the undead, and led them to the field. Losing the store wasn't an option, so I kept them isolated to the grass and worked away at the horde. Unlike other times, I avoided yelling to keep those near the store entrance to a minimum. Clearing the area wasn't necessary. I just needed access to the store. Once the horde was small enough, I finished the remainder and approached. They were close by, but I would at least get one run in. Inside I found the items to repair tools, fishing equipment, seeds, crowbars, screws, nails, metal, and a wood axe. Wanting to be able to fight, I avoided overloading myself and headed back to the car, deposited everything, made my way back inside. Emboldened by the lack of zombies, I began stripping the store. With the boot full, I resorted to using the seats to store items. For my last run, I cleaned out what was left, used what water I could, and prepared to leave.
Oh shit.
Retracing my steps was a mistake. The noise of the car passing through had filled the already cramped street. It was impossible to traverse without hitting something along the way, but with the hood in good condition, it wouldn't affect the engine. For now. With the entire street infested, I took the first way out I spotted. I was a little lost, but with a general bearing, it wasn't long until I returned to familiar streets. I had made it home. Before the undead could catch up, I brought the boot close to the entrance and prepared to fight. Unsure of how many were coming, I sealed much of my barricade to bottleneck them. The dead had arrived. I left most of the items in the car in favor of setting up gardening storage and using my newly acquired wood axe to chop down some trees. I sawed the felled logs into planks and combined them with the numerous boxes of nails to finish securing the entranceway and my house. After a long and successful day, it was time to sleep. Today would be the day I secured my future. With the items looted from the hardware store, I could now build a garden, grind my carpentry skill to make water collectors, and improve the defenses of my base. I eagerly listened to the weather forecast. If it was going to rain, I could sow my seeds the day before and drastically save on water. With no such luck, Moved the garden down on my priority list and instead worked on the other issues around my base. Built containers to store my newfound loot. Constructed a floor outside my second-story window for water collectors, who eventually plumbed them to my sink, though it was off-center. I also expanded my exterior storage to include farming equipment and wood waste. Soon I would have food and water sorted, my future would be secured. Another helicopter. The compound was clear, my defense is strong, but it could still come crashing down around me if it pulled too many into my wall. Unfortunately for me, the fog obscured everything. Once again, despite my best efforts, my future remained uncertain.